Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we have 7 ways British and American restaurants are very different. Hey, I don't know, I've never been to the UK, but I have been here. And yeah, I would love to go to the UK though. I would love to visit the restaurants. I would love to taste some of the foods. Like you got the pasties. No, I don't know which one it is. Pastries. I say pasties. I don't know, but you got that. You got the what was it? The sausage roll, the Sunday roast. Which one is the food where you have the sausage, you got tomatoes, you got mushrooms, you got eggs. Yeah, which one is that? I forgot. It's not the Sunday dinner, is it? Sunday roast? One of them, man. You got all of that. All this stuff that I would love to try. I love you guys' culture. I love everything you guys have to offer, man. The history that you guys have, I love it. The greenery, bro. That's one of the best things you guys have to offer, and that's like the number one reason that I would love to visit is the greenery, man. The greenery is just insane. Yeah, man, and yeah, I mean, we're gonna see, man. We're gonna see the restaurant. We're gonna see how they're very different. So let's get straight to the video. Come on.
To some degree, there'll be places in Britain that sell Chicago-style pizza, even though it's nothing like it. Or even in my birthplace of Cleethorpes, Chicago-style burgers, whatever that is. Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm...
Sorry, before we start, I want to make more original content, right? I want to go and try UK restaurants here in the US. Let me know if that's something you guys would like, and let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in. Like I would go try their food. I would go try different British experiences here. I will go and do that and visit them or whatever, if it's food, culture, whatever it may be. I will go visit it and make the videos like vlog style videos, and I would love to do that. Let me know if that's something you guys be interested in, for sure. Yeah, and I even try to make some British meals. Like, I know it's not my culture, that's why I have to ask you guys first, and stuff like that. Yeah, so let me know if that's something you guys be interested in. I definitely would love to do something like that, but tell me if that's something you guys be interested in.
To uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond. And one of those memos pertains to restaurants. Okay. And because food is involved, restaurants happen to be a kind of central hub for where British and American differences play out more broadly. Because we see differences in not just the food, but the terminology that's used and some of the customs that are practiced and the practices that are customed. And of course, the mere concept of a restaurant, I don't know why I'm doing that, the mere concept of a restaurant is universal, but the way that they are presented to and used by Brits and Americans is subtly and sometimes not so subtly different. And so here are 7 ways in which British and American restaurants are very different. For Brits moving to or even visiting the United States of America, one of the biggest culture shocks, at least for me, was the kind of round-the-clock attention that servers pay to their customers. What's that? Your glass of water is empty? We can't be having that. American servers come right on over, minus the whistling sound, usually. And in between that and a bite of your broccoli, American waitstaff will be over just to simply ask, how's that food tasting? Can I get you anything else? Golly gee, that's a nice accent. Which part of Australia are you from? Those kind of questions. Whereas British waitstaff are staff that, wait to come over until you're all done. And part of this is tied to the notion of tips.
I see what you did there, buddy.
And tipping. In Britain, contrary to popular belief, servers do make a bulk of their income from tips. But unlike in America, tipping is voluntary and not at all expected. A lot of Brits who come to the United States, myself included, don't know this at first. In my case, I even asked the waiter how much I should tip, so I gave her the 75% she recommended and moved on. Of course, with time, I came to...
75% is crazy.
Learn that the expected amount here in the United States of America is 15 to 20% of your bill and or check will come onto terminology later. It's often been noted, especially within the fast food industry, that portion sizes in the United States of America are much larger than their European counterparts. But often, depending on where you go, this can also be true of sit-down restaurants. One of the first major American sit-down chain restaurants that I visited was a little place called Applebee's. And at the likes of Applebee's, but also the Olive Garden or TGI Friday or any number of other chains, your appetizer almost feels like a main course / entree. Again, terminologies later. And by the time that the actual main course arrives, you eat it merely out of politeness while pretending that this is all fine. And then, this is the really funny bit, they ask you if you want to see the dessert menu. And of course you can't say no because you're addicted to cheesecake. And that's always humongous and rich as opposed to humongous and poor, which is what you are when you leave the restaurant. Except that cheap joke doesn't quite work because American food on the whole is actually cheaper compared to the food served in Britain, which is partially how you account for the portion size difference. Now, after a while, I noticed that there were Americans all around me that instead of ploughing through this mountain of calories in one sitting, answered yes to what was then an unfamiliar question to me. That's right, it's completely normal in the United States of America to have your food boxed at the end of the meal with the intention of you taking it home and refrigerating it, or just eat it later that night if you're feeling lucky. And of course now that makes sense, right? I mean, you've paid your money for that food, you want to get your money's worth. But on top of that, it cuts down on waste. But at first, just because of what I was used to back home, it seemed weird to be taking leftovers home from a restaurant. In Britain, as evidenced by this BBC article from a few years back, we've historically felt embarrassed even to ask for a box or a doggy bag because I don't know, I haven't a clue why actually. Either way, I think leftovers are great to the...
Nah, man, like if I'm eating and I don't finish my meal, yeah, I mean they'll ask you, the way they will ask you, do you need a box? Like, I don't even have to ask for that. They'll ask you, do you need a box to go? Do you need a to-go box and stuff like that? And yeah, so yeah, that's kind of weird. I didn't know that was not a thing in the UK though. That's crazy.
Have Indian food for breakfast. Don't judge me. Buffets, aside from the fact that America seems to be just a tad more into them than Britain, there's an aspect of the buffet-going experience that differs greatly between the two countries. Where I was from, depending on the buffet in question, I almost got the impression that it was rude to the kitchen staff to ask for a new plate when you're going up for seconds. In other words, whenever I went for, say, a Chinese buffet, I would go up, get my plate, scoop on all the food, go back to my table, realise that I am unrelentingly gluttonous, and then go back up for seconds using the same plate. It made me feel good that while devouring lots of solids, I'd done a solid to the kitchen staff. That could be taken so many ways. Whereas once I moved to the United States, I realised that this was considered either weird or unhygienic. At American buffets, customers are expected to get a new, cleaner plate when they go up for seconds, because this is a measure seen at preventing cross-contamination. But I have to say, after practicing both methods, neither has caused me any personal problems. But while we're on the subject of Chinese food, that brings us on to this. I think it's fair to say that in both Britain and America, ethnic food, or food that is usually associated with a country that is not this one, is extremely popular. And to varying degrees, no matter if you're talking about the United States or Britain, the same countries are often represented at the dinner table. Off the top of my head, the big one is Chinese food. Except you guessed it, British Chinese food and American Chinese food is vastly different. In Britain, Chinese food is often spicy, sometimes curry-based. In the US, on the other hand, Chinese food tends to be centered around standalone fried meats, usually of the chicken variety. Now, these are not entirely absent from Britain, but one way that America differentiates itself is that its Chinese food tends to be a lot sweeter than in Britain. But whichever way you slice it, I planned that. Both British and American Chinese cuisine is a modified version of what actual Chinese people eat in China. And this seems to be a common theme that actually unites Britain and America. Take, for example, Indian food. While it should be pointed out that Indian food is more widely eaten in Britain than in the United States, and that in my experience, certain Indian curries tend to be spicier than their American counterparts, neither is anywhere near as spicy as authentic Indian. On the other hand, in terms of everything I just said there, almost the exact opposite is true of Mexican food. America, by virtue of its neighbourly status with Mexico, eats way more Mexican food than Britain does, even if, by all accounts, tacos and the like have started to make waves in Britain. But even America's version of Mexican food is often a departure from what's eaten south of the border, with authentic Mexican food often less spicy than Americans are used to. And it was in the restaurants of America that I got a first-hand feel for how America likes to modify the national dishes of other countries to create what amounts to their own version, because they even do this with English cuisine. And that brings us on to this. If you were to ask me to name 3 dishes from both countries, off the top of my head I would say this. For Britain, fish and chips, Sunday roast, and a full English breakfast. For America,
I think it's the full English breakfast I was thinking about earlier. I think it was.
hamburgers, hot dogs, and pizza. And yes, I realise that all of those have disputed or undisputed origins in Germany and Italy, but over time they have become synonymous with the United States. But to a lesser degree, and because of American influence, hamburgers, hot dogs, and pizza can all be found in restaurants in the UK. And I'm sure to some degree there'll be places in Britain that sell Chicago-style pizza even though it's nothing like it. Or even in my birthplace of Cleethorpes, Chicago-style burgers, whatever that is. But in reverse, whenever America tries to replicate popular British dishes, it's sort of like being in an alternate universe. It's great, but it's different. Very rarely do you get fish and chips where the chips/fries are thick cut and greasy, and the fish is singular and large. Instead, you usually get 3 or 4 smaller pieces of fish that are usually a tad saltier than what you'd expect back home. Oh, and did I mention, there's no mushy peas. Honestly, it's like being in the south of England. And in terms of the other two, the Sunday roast and the full English breakfast, well, I found those a lot harder to come by in the US than fish and chips. Even at those pubs that, every state has, that purport to be authentically British. And lastly, we can't talk about British versus American restaurant differences without talking about the terminology. You see, it's one thing to get your food boxed at the end of a sit-down meal, but many of us might like to take it home without sitting down in the restaurant in the first place. In Britain, I always knew this as getting takeaway, which is why I was profoundly confused when I worked in an American office environment, and they talked about the key takeaways from the meeting. I thought I was getting curry and chips. In America, this is referred to as takeout or sometimes carry out. And regardless of portion size, we can't even agree on what to call each meal. In the US, for the most part, the meal immediately preceding the main meal is usually known as an appetizer. In Britain, I always refer to this as a starter, but some as the...
I've heard that too also. I've heard that term also, starter. Yeah, I've heard that also.
French might call it an entree.
And I've heard that one too.
Things get confusing because Americans and Canadians alike use the word entree to mean the main meal. For us, the main meal is usually known as the main course. If it's a Sunday roast, that main course will include a Yorkshire pudding, and this is where things get doubly confusing because we in Britain also use the word pudding as a catch-all term for dessert. In fairness, we do also interchangeably use the word dessert. In America, the word pudding is more specific and the catch-all term has been deserted in favour of dessert. And the implements with which we eat this food, i.e. the knife, fork and spoon, is known collectively in the United States as silverware, whereas this word, when used in Britain, would pertain more to ornate metal plates, or perhaps metallic jugs, or sports trophies. A lot of the time, instead, we'll collectively refer to knives, forks and spoons as cutlery. And as we all know, it's very rude to leave a restaurant without paying. And this is why we ask for the bill, or at least we do in Britain. Because most of the time here in the US, Americans will ask for the check. And that's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below if you've been to restaurants in both countries and what some of your observations were. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and don't forget to subscribe to my...
Yeah, man, this was a very good video. This is a very good video. Like, I usually like watching his videos too. It's very funny and entertaining. Man, like, I really want to go to the UK just so I could like experience you guys' culture, man, when it comes to restaurants, food, everything and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot of differences, and again, there's a lot of similarities. So thank you for watching this video with me, and thank him for making this video. Yeah, man, can't wait to go to the UK. Can't wait to go to the UK, man, for sure. Yeah, man, that's that. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.